There was a time when Sean Diddy Combs wasn't just another wealthy celebrity. He was the pulse of New York's nightlife. His rise was the stuff of legend. In the early 90s, he launched Bad Boy Records and stacked its roster with names that would shape hip-hop forever. Biggie, Usher, Mace. By 1998, he'd already moved beyond music, dropping Sean John clothing, pumping out fragrances, then investing in vodka that became staples in clubs he was too important to even stand in line for. But it wasn't just business. Diddy was building a brand around himself. Every party was a press conference without the microphones. Paparazzi couldn't get enough, and that was by design. Diddy didn't just crave the spotlight, he engineered it. According to insiders, the only thing he truly thought about from sunup to sundown was Diddy. Publicists who worked with him have said it outright. Diddy's hobby was Diddy. He treated fame like oxygen. If the cameras weren't clicking, he wasn't breathing. So he found a way to keep them on him at all times. Exclusive parties, VIP rooms that bent the knees of even the biggest names in the industry. And headlines. Always, always headlines. This was more than ego. Diddy was setting himself up as New York's undisputed party king. Because as long as people wanted an invite to his events, they'd never stop talking about him. And as long as they were talking, he was winning. But being the king of New York nightlife wasn't enough. Diddy didn't just want to party with celebrities. He wanted to be royalty, literally. Behind the velvet ropes and flashing cameras, he was fixated on something far grander, the British royal family. Former insiders say he asked them again and again, more than 10 separate times, to reach out to Prince Harry and Prince William, offering first-class flights, 5-star suites, even personal security, just to get the princes to show up at his legendary parties. Diddy thought of himself as a monarch of music, so of course he wanted actual princes standing by his side. Inside his lavish New York apartment, he framed photos of Harry and William like trophies. Visitors said it was borderline bizarre, like he was trying to visually merge his world with theirs. Hip-hop royalty and blue blood royalty, all under one chandelier. But Harry and William never accepted. Maybe they sensed the circus for what it was, because around Diddy, everything was performance. His former publicist described it best. Being in Diddy's circle was like living inside a traveling circus, and he was always the ringmaster. It wasn't just the glitz or the music that mattered. It was the power. Total unchallenged power. If you stepped into Diddy's world, you played by his rules. And from the outside looking in, that might have seemed glamorous. But power like that, it almost always comes with shadows no spotlight can hide. If there was ever a perfect symbol of Diddy's empire, it was the white party. A strict all-white dress code, sprawling estates in the Hamptons and Beverly Hills, fireworks, diamond chandeliers hanging over swimming pools, and guest lists that read like pop culture's A-team. Mariah Carey, Paris Hilton, Jay-Z, even Kim Kardashian before she was Kim Kardashian. Diddy sold it as a celebration that broke down racial and generational walls. Hip-hop stars mingling with old money elites, everyone sipping from the same crystal glasses under the same summer sky. It was glamorous. It was exclusive. And according to some, it was hiding something far darker. Neighbors who lived near his Beverly Hills mansion told reporters they were fed up with the chaos. For years, they said it was just parties, 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 with young women wandering outside at all hours looking dazed, underwear showing, unsure of where they even were. Police were called to Diddy's house at least 14 times in 7 years. But inside those towering gates, the party never seemed to stop. Then came the lawsuits. One man claimed he attended Diddy's very first white party in 1998 at just 16, hoping to break into the music scene. According to his lawsuit, that dream turned into a nightmare. Alleging Diddy led him into a private room, told him he had the look, then forced him into a so-called rite of passage that was anything but consensual. And that wasn't the only story. A former adult film star alleged she was groomed into sex trafficking after working multiple white parties where, she claimed, The alcohol was laced with drugs. Another man who worked security at a 2006 white party said in court documents that drinks were spiked and that he himself was raped by Diddy. Diddy's lawyers called these lawsuits blatant grabs for publicity. They painted the parties as moments of black excellence, unfairly twisted by opportunists and the media. But behind the white linens and flashing cameras, more than a dozen civil suits have surfaced, telling stories that feel less like fairy tales and more like horror shows. As the lawsuits piled up, so did the disturbing details. What looked like harmless party excess started to sound more like a hunting ground. Former adult film star Adria English claimed she was slowly groomed into sex trafficking by Diddy's circle after working at multiple white parties where, according to her, the drinks were intentionally laced. She wasn't alone. Men and women have stepped forward in civil suits, saying they were pressured or outright forced into sex, either by Diddy himself or by people who worked for him. Some alleged they were threatened. Others said they stayed silent because they feared for their careers. One lawsuit spelled it out clearly. If you didn't cave to Diddy's whims, you could watch your opportunities vanish. Record deals suddenly stalled. Phone calls never returned. Your name? Blacklisted. Singer Cassie, who dated Diddy off and on for nearly a decade, dropped a bombshell lawsuit that ignited a wave of fresh accusations. She claimed Diddy didn't just control her career, he controlled every breath of her life. Forced drugs, forced sex with strangers, brutal beatings, threats so chilling she believed going to the police would only give him another reason to hurt her. Her suit described how Diddy's empire ran on fear and loyalty, a network of people willing to do anything to protect him, because crossing him meant losing everything. And just when it seemed the stories couldn't get darker, the focus shifted to something even more grotesque. By the time federal prosecutors got involved, the story had swerved way past flashy parties. It landed in hotel suites where the doors locked and the real nightmares began. According to the Department of Justice, Diddy and his close crew organized what they called freak-offs. These weren't wild after-parties with harmless hedonism. They were multi-day marathons, stocked with ketamine, ecstasy, Coca-Cola, IV fluids, enough lube and baby oil to fill a warehouse, plus cameras rolling to capture everything. The indictment reads like something out of a horror film. It alleges guests were given drugs, or threatened into staying, then recorded performing sex acts. Some woke up battered and bruised, injuries that prosecutors say took weeks to heal. Cassie's lawsuit painted these freak-offs with even grimmer strokes. She said they happened almost every week, with Diddy flying in sex workers from across the country, forcing her into humiliating scenes under the influence, and recording it all. The feds laid it bare. This wasn't about pleasure. It was about power, keeping people high, compliant, and terrified enough to never say no. When law enforcement finally raided Diddy's homes in Los Angeles and Miami, they found AR-15-style rifles, high-capacity magazines, thousands of bottles of lubricants, an arsenal and a stash of supplies that seemed to back up every grim allegation. By then, the house of cards had already started to tumble, because with federal charges of racketeering, sex trafficking, and transporting people for prostitution, Diddy was no longer the king of parties. He was an accused criminal staring down the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. For years, if you were lucky or unlucky enough to be invited inside Diddy's private spaces, one thing became clear fast. This wasn't just a celebrity's home. It was a fortress. Visitors had to pass through metal detectors that felt more like TSA at JFK than a rapper's apartment. Security staff were everywhere, and they weren't just muscled-up bodyguards. They were armed, pistols strapped to their ankles even inside Diddy's own living quarters. Former insiders said guns were as common around Diddy's house as champagne flutes. It sent an unmistakable message. He wasn't just rich, he was untouchable. Crossing him didn't mean losing an invite. It could mean risking your life, or at least feeling like you were. This heavy security wasn't purely paranoia. It was power theater, a way to keep people in check. Guests, Staff, even longtime friends understood. Around Diddy, you stayed buttoned up. Nobody acted sloppy. Nobody asked uncomfortable questions. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes that this fortress mentality was how Diddy kept everything under wraps. A few bodyguards, some metal detectors, a fortress full of secrets. It's a textbook play. Surround yourself with loyal soldiers, keep outsiders intimidated, and your empire stands until someone finally finds the courage to bring it down. For decades, Diddy built his entire brand on being the center of the universe. Cameras followed him everywhere. Crowds chanted his name. He once joked he wanted to be the most famous person on the planet. Well, wish granted, just not the way he pictured. Now, instead of silk suits and private jets, he's showing up in a beige prison jumpsuit, mouthing, "I love you," to his family across a grim courtroom. Fans still cluster outside, desperate for a glimpse, some whispering, "Free Diddy," like it's a spell that might undo everything. But the spell's broken, because under all that fame was a man who, according to prosecutors and a growing pile of lawsuits, wasn't just throwing decadent parties. He was allegedly running a criminal operation built on exploitation, fear, and absolute control. His former publicist put it bluntly. Diddy wanted to be the most famous person alive, and now, ironically, he is, just for reasons that are darker than any spotlight he ever danced under. So where does this leave the so-called King of New York? Facing a mountain of federal charges, over a dozen civil suits, and an industry that's suddenly not so eager to stand by his side. Prosecutors say the investigation is far from over. They're still digging, still connecting dots, and hint that Diddy didn't do this alone, that his entire empire was propped up by employees and insiders who helped keep the machine running. Meanwhile, lawyers like Gloria Allred say this could finally be the reckoning the music industry's needed for years. Victims are finding their voices, stepping out of Diddy's long shadow. Because, as Allred put it, courage is contagious. And that's what's most haunting here. If Diddy, with all his fame, money, private jets, and bulletproof image, could allegedly run something this twisted for so long, who else out there is still hiding behind the glitter and the cameras? That's a question the industry, and maybe even all of us, will have to face.